It's another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin, and it's Halloween week at Camp Dynasty.
I have been trying to get more into the Halloween spirit. As you know, I've been flying a lot, so I've been watching more scary movies. I've been on a movie journey, as you know, and I've been delving deep into the Scream movies. I did the Wicker Man. I did Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the first time. So, I've understood the references as we've gone along, but now you get to like fully immerse yourself and really understand it as a genre and as a feeling, the real frights.
It doesn't get any better, man.
That's right.
Month of October with a horror movie on and a nice glass of something strong. That's
right.
That's all you need right there. But
candy on sale? Come on.
Yeah, Reese's
That's
Pumpkins.
That's where I just was.
Oh my God. I've eaten enough Reese's Pumpkins already this year, I'll tell you that. But yeah, Halloween week. It's a fun time here. We're gonna be handing out some themed badges this week to a very star-studded crew of campers this week. Last week we hit some of the deep cuts. We might have a few of those guys coming back on the show already this week, but we're also going to have some big names. So it's an exciting week of college football, and especially when we're thinking about the 2025 Dynasty rookie class, which is taking shape. We've talked about this a few times. The picture gets a little clearer every single week, and I think some of the guys we're starting the show with this week are a big part of the story of this class. So you won the coin toss this week, and you got to make this very, very easy selection, I would say, with one of the top guys that we've been talking about all year.
Yeah, we got Tetairoa McMillan off the top here. He played West Virginia, had 10 catches on 14 targets for 202 yards and a touchdown. He's getting the thing badge because he just turns into whatever you need him to turn into on any given day. The guy is just like, what the fuck is this thing? You're looking at it, it's not quite right. He moves a little too smoothly for how big he is. He's like, yards after the catch now it has become part of just his MO. We kind of talked about wanting to see him add that into his game more in 2024. And it seems like it's like fully integrated. We saw it a few times when we've talked about McMillan so far, and he had a really nice play against West Virginia where he kind of caught a pass over the middle and then reversed field and decelerated and made a couple guys miss. And it's just like, this is just kind of par for the course of what we see with Tetairoa McMillan in these games.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of this season for him, is just kind of adding a little bit to his repertoire in terms of after the catch. And it's not really it's not an extreme volume number. I mean, it's like this week one performance has kind of, bolstered his yak total overall for the entirety of the season. And in most games, he's not getting a huge total, but you see it on film. You see the movement skills that he has, and you see him forcing missed tackles. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago, but up to 22 missed tackles forced on the season. Now there was 3 more in this game. That's one of the highest, numbers amongst all pass catchers right now. So first of all, the thing, man, what a movie.
Yeah.
And what a badge, because I agree. It's like, it's unnatural. I mean, you see it in this game. I think one of the things that stood out to me watching this one, the trick play, there was 2 of them, but specifically the first one, where they get him out as a passer. It's a trick play. He's going to pass, and he's back there scrambling around, making guys miss, running like, Lamar Jackson back there, evading tacklers. And it's like, this is a 6'5", 210-pound wide receiver, and he moves like that. And so when you see that kind of stuff, even on a weird little situation in the game, you just see how he moves differently than most players at this size do. And then, of course, that shows up in his routes. I mean, more digs in this game. That is such a killer route for him. He just really eats over the middle of the field. And then that the crazy one where he's like tailed by 4 defenders running to the sideline, and he just leaps up and brings it down, doesn't even look hard, makes it look like a routine catch. And that's just who he is, man. He's a special player having a special season, and he's going to be, a top 3 at worst dynasty rookie pick when it's all said and done, I would say.
Yeah, people in the comments of his videos are like, welcome to New England.
Yeah. It's exactly what they need too.
Yeah, 100%. Have you seen the Thing remake?
I have not.
It's not good, but it's also like
it's like worth a watch.
I kind of like it. Just to appreciate it.
It's one of those things where like the original is just so legendary that I'm like, why do you even touch it? Like, why do we always have to remake every single movie that's ever been successful?
It also was remade in the era where like we thought we had like really good CGI.
Yeah.
But like you watch it back and it's like, ugh. All right.
Oh, man. Remakes. That's a prickly topic for me, but
I get it.
All right. Well, let's talk about another star wide receiver in this class, and that is Travis Hunter. He is getting the Phantom badge from me this week, specifically for the play that he had in this game against the sideline. I don't know if it was a comeback or some sort of route where he's coming back towards the quarterback, and then the defender's closing down, and he just whoops his way out of there, like disappears, turns invisible, and all of a sudden he's running up the field. I mean, just a glimpse into this player's athleticism on that play. And you saw it too on his first touchdown. By the way, 9 catches, 9 targets, 153 and 2 touchdowns this week against Cincinnati. Colorado up to 6-2 this season. And obviously this player is a huge reason why, but first touchdown he had, really nice slant route. He's just so springy. The athleticism is so apparent, just jumps off the screen, where even if he is not this like technically refined wide receiver yet, he has this, rare athleticism to fall back on. And it works for him right now in a big way. And another huge game for Travis Hunter.
Yeah. The play you're talking about, it's like, he goes at it with such a pace that feels, when he comes out of his break, it's almost like it's a run play, because he's not exploding out of a break. He's just kind of like sauntering off the line of scrimmage, and then he hits the gas. So the Cincinnati defender kind of turns into bail coverage, and then he hits the brakes and comes back to the ball. And it's like, this is just like good wide receiver work. And this is the conversation that we've had with Travis Hunter through this entire draft, I guess, like college football season, where we're like, is he going to be a corner? Is he going to be a wide receiver? Obviously he has special traits as a defender, but like when you see stuff like this, where the route running looks a lot more refined in this year than it did last year. And then like on that same play, when he's catching the ball and in midair, he's like looking behind him to see where the defender is, and then lands, shakes him, and then gets another 10 yards. It's like, man, this is very high level. And so I fully am expecting him to be a wide receiver. This is going to be a topic for a long time going forward, but I fully expect Travis Hunter to be a full-time wide receiver, part-time defender. And I think that's just the way it works out when it comes to logistics with, the contracts, which I've mentioned a lot, but also the skill. It's like, man, he's damn good as a wide receiver. It's not like he's giving up a ton anymore. Like, it seemed like he was here as a corner and like here as a receiver, and it's like it worked out. He could play both, but now it seems like he's getting pretty close to where he is as a defender as a wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to last year, one of the things that stood out to me was his exactly what you're talking about, the spatial awareness and the ability with the ball in the air. And I think you saw it on that play, obviously, being aware of where the defender is, being able to immediately land, pivot, and run for extra yards up the sideline. And you also saw it on both of the deep shots that he got in this game, because Sanders left both of those passes short, and you see Travis Hunter adjust to the ball. In the case of the touchdown, I mean, it's like he's adjusting to the ball and then he's extending. He knows where he needs to be to get into the end zone, extends the ball over the plane for his second touchdown of the game. So it's those sorts of things. It's those intangible things that you see with these wide receivers sometimes, where a lot of guys are fast, a lot of guys are athletic, a lot of guys can run solid routes. But these little things that Travis Hunter shows you that he has as a wide receiver is what makes him such a fun player to imagine his ceiling and what he can turn into with even more development.
Absolutely.
Man, we are hitting a lot of the highlights here, and I thought we might have to make a call home this week for this player, but instead he's getting a badge anyway.
This is Ashton Jeanty. He's back. It was actually, I mean, a bad game for Ashton Jeanty, right? 33 carries, 128 yards, and only one touchdown. 3.9 yards per carry. That actually brings him down to 8.7 on the season.
How is he going to recover this Heisman campaign?
Unfortunate. He's actually down to like 5th in Heisman odds now.
I saw that.
Damn. But he's getting the Michael Myers badge. I mean, how could you not? We've seen the edits. We've seen the TikToks. The way he just like stands menacingly in the backfield, the way he is inevitable as a player. He's just always going to, it's just going to happen, whether you want it to or not. He looked good in this game. I mean, I watched this one start to finish, and UNLV is loading up 7-8 man boxes on almost every single play, and Boise State gave it to him 33 times. They're like, hey man, we're putting this game on your shoulders and see what we can do. And it seemed like every single time they needed a big run, Jeanty delivered a big run. It was like, instead of being the 60-yard touchdown run that it has been in the first half of the season, it was like a 15-yard first down to move the chains on 3rd and 6. And it was like the touchdown run that he had. It was like, is he still behind me? Is he still, where's Michael Myers? And then he's like, oh, fuck, he's right there. And it's like, he's just like, break a tackle, break another tackle, push through 3 guys into the end zone. It's just really impressive, and this is the player that he always has been. It was just really tough sledding against this like UNLV defense that was playing the run every single play, and Boise State just didn't abandon, because their best way to win is give number 2 the ball.
This is the problem when you become superhuman. Like, when you are an athlete that is so dominant and so transcendent, it's like your like normal game seems like a terrible game.
Right.
Like the
he also hyperextended his elbow in this game.
Yeah.
And just came back like 2 plays later.
Yeah, I know. I saw him like writhing around on the ground, and then he's just back in the game. But it's like, okay, 3.9 yards per carry, whatever. It's like, that's not like a horrible mark, especially when you're running into these loaded fronts, like you said. So it's like, I just love the reaction to this one, and everybody being like, oh, well, okay. It's like, no, this was still this is the sort of game that a lot of backs in college would love to have on any given week.
And if this is his worst game.
Right.
Like, yeah.
It's manufactured drama for the Heisman race. It is what it is. But yeah, another great performance from Jeanty. You saw plenty of Jeanty things in this game. Some of his runs with the contact balance, just he is becoming that sort of player, that no doubt talent. It's week after week. You see the numbers, and then you see it on film, and now we're at that point where it's like, yeah, it's inevitable. He's the Dynasty 101. He's going to be a first round running back. How high will he go? That's the question.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's talk about a player that we have not mentioned since summer. So we played the hits here to start, but the hits of week 9 actually could start with Jarquez Hunter, because he had a phenomenal game, a career best game, and one of the best rushing performances of the entire season. This is, of course, Auburn's running back. We briefly talked about him on Feldman's Freaks. This was a Feldman's Freak at running back. He's had a solid season up till this point. It's really kind of been his MO in college. He's a solid player. He's been a solid player every single year. Never anything flashy. He had the best season last year as a junior with 911 yards, but he is on pace to eclipse that this year, and it's a bit. And this game is a big reason why. 23 carries, 278 yards rushing, and 2 touchdowns against Kentucky. This was a game where, like early in the game, it was a little slow. It was a little sloppy on the Auburn side. And then it just seemed like Jarquez Hunter was like, I'm done. Like, let's go win this game. And he's getting the slow burn badge from me. A lot of horror movies. You sit there for 30 minutes, maybe longer, and you're like, what are we doing here? Like, what's happening? And then all of a sudden something happens, and then it's like you're going down on the roller coaster the rest of the way, and you're like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything.
Shouldn't have doubted this.
Because he only had 24 yards rushing before their final drive of the first half. The final drive of the first half, he added like a 24-yard carry and a 16-yard carry. He was up to like 64 yards at halftime, and then 214 yards in the second half, and Auburn just takes control of this game. It's like the thing in fantasy where it's like you're playing against Jarquez Hunter and the first half, and you're like, oh, I'm fine, like coast into a win, and then it's just bang, you're dead. You're getting blown out.
That happened to me with CeeDee Lamb this week.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, I'm feeling pretty good. He had like 11 points going into right before he scored his first touchdown. And then it was like, he has 40. It's like, fuck.
I mean, he won me my matchup this week, so I'll take that. Jarquez Hunter, though, I mean, again, this is like probably the 20th running back we've given a badge to this season. And I think he is a guy that probably slots lower in this class. I mean, you see it in this game, like strong, athletic. He's got a little bit of speed. He landed on Feldman's Freaks with, they popped in there. He's got a 4.45 40 timed in his past. You see him get caught from behind, a couple times in this game, but like the acceleration through the hole for a player that has, some power to his game and some leg drive to get through traffic and then to turn it on at the second level, even if he's not finishing all of these runs, still an impressive player. And so, again, I don't think this is a high ceiling back necessarily, but a guy that is a senior and it'd probably be in this draft class. And I think he's going to make an NFL team. And that's the kind of class we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's just a guy that is going to keep his legs churning at all times. He's going to grind out every single yard that you'll give him on every single play. Just a good player. Excuse me. A good player that is like has some athleticism to burn, has good fundamentals where, like you said, he'll be a contributor for an NFL team. He'll be a guy that you can hand the ball off to, 15 times in a game if you need to, and he's going to churn it out to be exactly what you want. I've said before, like all the coach wants is a running back to not fumble and to be able to get 3 yards on any given run. And this is the exact type of guy where you can hand it to him and you can trust him to go north and south and to get you the yards that you need and then some. So I like this guy.
Fun player. A lot of just so many fun running backs in this class. And guys, I mean, we think back to even last year, the class of, where it's not a sexy class and there's not a lot of top end talent. And then you see the Ray Davises of the world, the Isaac Arendos of the world. They're showing up in the NFL at this point. So these depth running backs, man, they're always a thing. Always have to keep your eyes on them. Where do they land? So, all right, let's talk about another player that is no stranger to Camp Dynasty. I feel like we've talked about him probably every single season at some point at Camp Dynasty, and he's here again.
Yeah, he absolutely is. It's Brant Kuithe. He's getting the zombie badge because just when you think he's dead, he's not. Went for 5 catches on 5 targets for 113 yards and a touchdown. I mean, he had like a 71-yard touchdown off of a tight end screen in this game. He looked pretty fast. And I was like, I forgot about this player. Like, he's been at Utah for 6 years. He's a 6-year senior, and he is on pace to have the best season of his career at Utah. People make fun of the quarterbacks, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Cam Rising. Make fun of this guy a little bit. I mean, Jesus, 6 years, it's kind of crazy. But, I mean, it's just one of the tight ends in this class that we know is going to come. I mean, I can say definitively he's coming out, because if he doesn't, I'm concerned. Like, I don't know how you get a 7th
I don't think you have any eligibility left at this point.
That's what I think about every player, and then they go back to college, and it's like, how are you there for a 9th year? But Kuithe has some juice, and is a guy that there's a reason we've been talking about him for a few years, because he has some skills at the tight end position. Now, do I want to draft a 25-year-old tight end? I don't know. At this point, why not? Because maybe they'll be closer to hitting their breakout because they're already old and you don't have to wait as long. But I don't know. Brant Kuithe looked a little quick today.
Hey, he was the top 5 tight end coming into the season for you, wasn't he?
I think he was 5th.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a player that you go back to, Dalton Kincaid. These guys are playing side by side. And he tears his ACL in September of 2022, and he didn't come back until this season. He missed all of 2023 because of that knee injury that he suffered early in 2022. So it was a incredibly long road to recovery. It's the sort of thing where it's like, what are we going to see when he gets back on the field? Will this even be the same player at this point? And then what you're seeing is that, yeah, it is the same player, and he maybe will have the best season of his college career. That's what he's on pace to have at this point. And this performance, his best of the season. So, yeah, he's an interesting player. There's a few older tight ends in this class that I do like, that have skill for sure. And we've talked about it before. This is a loaded tight end group. So I think some of these guys are going to get pushed down the board and come NFL draft time, but it's got, it's a testament to the depth and the talent of this tight end group that you're going to have players like this that are probably going on day 3, because I think Kuithe has the talent to contribute at the NFL level, assuming that he can stay healthy.
Yeah, and the underlying stats are also pretty good. You look at things like yards per route run, and he's always been pretty good in that metric. You want him to be over 2, essentially around 2.5 is pretty good, and he has gotten up to 2.56 this year. He's been around 2.25 for the rest of his career. His yards after catch per reception is easily the highest it's been in his career. So just a guy to keep an eye on as this guy's kind of a smooth player that's been around a while, that has something to him.
Let's talk about a player that we talked about last week for the first time this season, and he's already coming back. It's Damien Martinez, the running back from Miami. Talked about it last week. Transfers into the program, ends up in a committee. And it seemed like for 6 weeks that might have hindered him from a production standpoint, perhaps but from an NFL draft standpoint. Like, would his stock be where it was entering the season, coming off of a great year at Oregon State? And last week we talked about it. He kind of showed some of that old magic that he had at Oregon State with the power running, and guys just cannot bring him down at all. And it seems like he's found something with that, because it happened again this week against Florida State. 15 carries for 148 yards and 2 touchdowns. Easily his best game of the season. Most carries he's had since week 1. First 100-yard game of the season. I mean, like, this was really that moment, I think, where you stop and say, okay, Damien Martinez has been in this committee. We saw it in this game. They were like alternating drives, and then every time it was Martinez's turn to party, it was like, yeah, let's get this guy on the field. Like, 109 yards after contact in this game, over 7 yards after contact per attempt. I mean, he is getting the back from the dead badge for me, specifically for the one run in which he is running into a pile of defenders, keeping the legs churning. We're not blowing the whistle. The play's not dead. Forward progress, all that. Nope, he finds a way out of this clump of bodies and picks up additional yardage down the sideline on that play. I mean, he is just a tough-nosed, no bullshit type of running back. I said it last week, maybe a little more specialized than some of the top guys we're going to be talking about in this class, but this is a fun player, and I think it's a player that in the right situation can make a lot of noise next year.
Yeah, it's like, Damien, you're outnumbered 6-1. He's like, I like those odds.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a true power back in this class. We have a lot of different types of backs. We have talked about, there's just a ton of running backs in general, but Martinez seems like one of the specialists, like true power guys that's going to put his helmet down and punish you for trying to meet him in the hole. So he, I mean, is a lot of fun to watch too. It's the type of guy that, you know, is probably not going to break loose once he gets beyond the second level. But you also know that if he's getting the ball, there's probably going to be fireworks at the point of contact. And so I appreciate watching this guy. I mean, this is going to be a guy that is in the league just for one reason or another, a guy that is going to churn out a bunch of tough yards.
And also, he had a 21-yard reception in this game. He is over his career best in receiving yards already on the young season. Matched his, total from last year in terms of receptions, 11 catches so far this year, and 151 yards. So he's adding a little bit of an additional element to his game. We know how important that is at the NFL level these days. So, all right, deja vu. We're talking about another player that we brought up last week for the first time.
That's right. So we're talking about Ja'Cory Brooks. He's getting the Sixth Sense badge. This has to do with, it feels like he has a sixth sense to know how to operate within his routes. He's a really good route runner, really smooth, finds blind spots, makes, sharp cuts when he needs to, turns defenders around. And also, tracking the ball in the air is his true, sixth sense. It's like he can get over the shoulder and, somehow find any of these passes. Now, the fatal flaw of Ja'Cory Brooks, as we've mentioned, is the drops, but goes into this game and he's clean against Boston College. He had 8 catches on 10 targets for 120 yards. Didn't score in this game, but still has 8 touchdowns. leads the ACC in receiving yards and receptions. Has been having a fantastic season after coming over from Alabama, transferring, and just had another statement game against Boston College here. So have been impressed with him as a player, and I just feel like he's going to be maybe a later round guy that you can maybe steal of the draft.
What about this? How do you feel about a very soft Javon Baker tie-in?
What if Javon Baker's not good though?
Well,
because he's in the NFL and gets healthy scratched every week. So
we know. What did we say last week? Patience.
No,
it pays off, you know.
You're right. No, I do like that. I think that you're not very wrong about that, where it's just like a very athletic player that, you know, maybe comes out as a surprise and you can get later in your drafts, and he's a nice little upside piece.
Alabama transfer,
right?
Wide receiver, blows up at his next program. Kind of long, lanky, outside receiver, little bit of a hands problem, but can run some nice routes, has great catch point ability. I mean, this is what happens when you do this every week and you just find these parallels between guys you just talked about. But I do see similarities. And Baker, of course, was a 4th round pick in the NFL draft. I think that's maybe the range you could expect a guy like Brooks. But honestly, I might be at a point where I think he could be a day 2 sort of player. I think he's really finding something this season. I love what I see in terms of the ball tracking, just a very nice outside receiver profile for him, doing all of those things you're looking for from an X wide receiver. The only problem is his hands. Can you rely on him to consistently catch the football? He's consistently catching it in these, dramatic jump ball situations, but can he catch the easy ones consistently? So that's obviously going to be the big knock. But yeah, you see it again in this game. I mean, just against the sideline, that catch, it wasn't a touchdown catch, but it was against the sideline. He just makes another ridiculous grab. And it seems like he's doing that every week at this point. So he's become a really fun player, a player that's just really fun to watch just from an entertainment perspective. But yeah, a guy that I'm starting to like a little bit in this class.
Yeah, the catch you're talking about, he is fully covered. I mean, he obviously has room. He stacked them, so he has room between him and the sideline. But he's boxing out this defender. The defender pulls the arm down, as any savvy corner does, and he's kind of cuffs it with the one hand and pulls it in. It's like, yeah, why can't you catch a dig? Like, how can you do this and you can't just like catch a 15-yard in route? Especially like I was talking to you about this. There was a play against Notre Dame where he runs like a textbook dig route where he's releases outside off the line of scrimmage, so it makes the cornerback turn. He gets into the cornerback's blind spot, and then he breaks inside. So he has about 2 yards of separation. Quarterback puts it right on his hands, and he just like catches it, fumbles it, and like shovels it right to the safety. And it's just like, brother, how are you making like circus catches? But obviously it's concentration. You're thinking about running after catching. Well, it's like, I need to catch the ball and like, that's it. But man, it's just like, I would love to see the consistency with the hands game in and game out. Cause I mean, if he could put that together, I don't know.
Fun player.
That's
Fun
right.
player. All right. Let's talk about another fun player. One that I think is going to sit near the top of this draft class when it's all said and done. We got him in on midseason. It was a new name. He wasn't involved in the summer at all, having a just ridiculous season, and it's Kaleb Johnson. He was my number 10 player in midseason, and it already feels like that might have been too low. Like, every time I watch Kaleb Johnson play, man, you just see all of those things at running back that just light your brain up. Like, he's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the vision, he's got the footwork, he's got the power. I mean, you see it in this game against Northwestern. 14 carries, 109 yards, 3 more touchdowns for Kaleb Johnson. And Iowa was struggling in the first half of this game. It was a tight game. Northwestern was ahead for a while. It was a sluggish offensive start. Quarterback play was a mess for Iowa. And then Kaleb Johnson just started getting the ball and taking over the game. And that's why he's getting the gravedigger badge for me, because it was like, let's get the ball in our best players' hands. They were rotating backs even in this game. And it's like, every time you give it to Kaleb, it's a huge play. It's a touchdown. It's like, he is one of the best players in college football at any position. It's a player that should be in the Heisman conversation, even if, there's a few names ahead of him. I think the name is worthy of being in that sort of conversation at this point. But what's even more exciting is the traits that he puts on film right now at the running back spot. So you see all 3 of his touchdowns in this game too were like special sorts of runs, or they weren't just like, it wasn't a 1-yard punch it in. You got a highlight run to end the first half, the final drive that they had in the first half, bouncing it outside, getting away from contact, finishing the run. The second touchdown, acceleration right up the gut. Very tight space opens, and you get this big man getting skinny and turning on the gas, and every defender at the second and third level cannot catch up to him. Finishes that for a touchdown. Now we got the speed in there. Then how about the third touchdown? Again, navigating tight spaces with good feet, hitting the gas to get outside, and then landing a devastating stiff arm, and then finishes the run. I mean, it was a highlight reel performance on only 14 carries for Kaleb Johnson in this game. He's becoming one of my favorite players in this class.
Yeah, this is the type of guy that I wish you could keep a secret. Like, I don't want other people to know about Kaleb Johnson, but I mean, he's just such a strong runner. Like, it's so impressive how tacklers just bounce off of him. You mentioned the touchdown at the end of the first half where he hits a cutback, he stiff arms one guy, and then the other guy comes in to like hit stick him. So he's coming down just straight shoulder, and Johnson just kind of like spins off of him and then keeps his balance, stiff arms another guy, and then goes into the end zone. It's just like, he feels like he's always under control when he's running, and he's always solid. Like, there's no, like, if you're hitting him, you're probably going the other way. And that's like exactly what you want. And it makes it really easy to trust a guy to hand off the ball to him, maybe more than 15 times a game, Iowa, but you guys are doing fine. But I would love to see him get just like a bell cow load of touches, because every time he touches the ball, like you said, it seems like something special is happening. Because we talk about Ashton Jeanty and the season he's having and the yards per carry that he has. Kaleb Johnson is averaging almost 8 yards per carry. Like, we're right on pace there, and he's got a little better O-line, but it's still, it's still pretty good.
Props to the Iowa O-line, man. They are ass kickers. It's a great line. Every time you watch Johnson, you're seeing just as much talent on the offensive line as at the running back position, maybe. But yeah, 16 touchdowns on the year now. Hasn't fumbled, gets a little mixed up in the pass game. He's the sort of player that I think, when we dive into postseason film and like really understand his game versus the rest of these guys, I just wonder how high he's going to end up for us.
I think you mentioned if Ashton Jeanty didn't exist, like, we would be talking about this guy in a different way.
Yeah. It really is like 1,100 yards, 16 touchdowns. Right now, when you look at college football, it is Jeanty, it is Johnson, and then it feels like it's just everybody else behind them. So, all right, that's everybody.
That's everybody.
That's 8.
Pretty
wow.
good.
Time flies when you're talking about great players.
That's
right. But we do have to do something that we do every week here, which is talk about some of the scary stuff, the bad news.
The call is coming from inside the house.
Let's make the call home. Evan Stewart. I mean, another week. 1 catch, 4 targets, 19 yards versus Illinois. This is the 5th game this year that he has been under 30 yards receiving. So, and there's some good ones. There's some good ones and those other games that don't fall into that category. But the consistency factor, and for this player specifically, I think the inconsistency factor does trip some alarms in my brain a little bit more. So what have you seen with Evan Stewart this year?
It kind of seems like a classic boom bust situation with Evan Stewart, and that's not a bad thing. It's just hard to rely on him in a fantasy football sense because we kind of expected Evan Stewart to be a every play contributor coming out of A&M, being a highly touted prospect, being one of the highest touted transfer portal players, and then comes to Oregon in a high-powered offense with Dylan Gabriel, who also came over, and it's been like you said, it's been some good and some not so good, and it seems like when they hit the deep ball, then you see the 5 catches for 112 yards. You see the 7 catches for 149 yards, the 4 catches for 96 yards. And, the big games, he's averaging 20 plus yards per catch. The not so good games, they don't connect on those deep passes. So I think that really is the sum of it. The A dot ends up coming into play. They'll throw him some short stuff to try to get him going, but if they don't connect on the deep stuff, it just doesn't seem like you ignite the big games that he might have.
Yeah, you wanted him to be Troy Franklin in this offense. And the reason the inconsistency stands out to me is because when we talked about Stewart coming into the season, and he was one of our top wide receivers in the class overall, but that comes with a caveat of like, there is a lot of projection here. You've seen these flashes at A&M, but then last year he's dealing with injuries and the hands have been suspect. So it's like, we need to see him put it all together. We need to see him walk into Oregon. It feels like a perfect fit for his skill set. If he can stay healthy and he can take a step forward, I think we'll be talking about him amongst the best wide receivers in this class. And I just don't think that's what we've seen this year. We've seen him make strides in some areas, like he doesn't have a drop this year. That is a very positive sign for him as a player that has, a 14 and a 9% drop rate in his 2 previous seasons in college football. Hasn't dropped one this year. All right, that's cool. The hands seem to be improved. The problem for me is that right now, when you look at how the targets are breaking out on this team, Tez Johnson, who is clearly their wide receiver 1 this season, 76 targets on the year, Stewart at only 40. So Tez Johnson is a good player. It's a player that we've talked about here, undersized, but has this electric skill set that's going to make him appealing at the NFL level regardless. You just would have liked to see Stewart compete a little bit more for targets in this offense. But what you're seeing is that he's clearly the number 2 option behind Johnson right now. And that's kind of interesting when you talk about a player that's been inconsistent, that hasn't really put all of this talent that you think that he has. You haven't seen him put it all together yet, and he's still not doing that this year.
Yeah, 100%. This is one of the guys that we had ranked pretty highly in the preseason, and that was based on anticipation for what he would do in this season. And it just, I mean, I wouldn't say it's falling flat, but it's just the expectations and reality didn't quite line up. And it's almost like Tej Johnson, like market corrected Evan Stewart, where he's just doing what we wanted Evan Stewart to do. So, which is fine. I mean, I'll take it.
Yeah. The fun player.
Yeah.
But Stewart, his best game of the year, though, came against Ohio State. So he's an interesting one that we're going to have to find out a little bit more at the end of this season. But I'm not so sure he's going to be in that number 5, 6 spot for us like he was in the preseason. But we'll find out.
Do we want him to play in the slot more?
I mean, I thought he looked pretty good outside, but the size, it's like you'd think that he might fit better in the slot.
It's easier to play in the slot.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like every time you're like, hey, let's throw this guy in the slot, it's never like a bad thing, And, Ohio State had his most slot snaps on the season and looked pretty good in that game. I don't know. Food for thought.
Something to think about.
I mean, when Tej Johnson's taking all the slot snaps, though.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you're 165-pound receivers in the slot. You got to keep the 175 guy outside.
Yeah, you're big guy.
Yeah. All right. Well, we don't end on bad news at Camp Dynasty, and I think there's some good news, maybe some bad news.
There's definitely some bad news.
There's news we're going to talk about. Let's light the fire and gather around for All Grown Up. So we were talking before the show, like, hey, we've done this for 2 years now. Like, typically we get the campfire rolling, get the marshmallow going, and we talk about the previous year's class exclusively. It's like the guys from 2 years ago are dead to us at this point. But I don't think it needs to be that way. Anybody who has come through the halls of Camp Dynasty, I mean, there's tape out there. We talked a lot about those 2022 guys. So one of them in particular, 2023 guys?
2023.
I cannot keep it
They played
straight.
in 2022.
Right.
Drafted in 2023.
Yep.
I know.
I'm never going to figure it out. But
like, these are the 2025 guys, but it's 2024.
It's never not going to be confusing. But
it's all right.
One of those 2023 guys. We'll start with the bad news so we can end with the good news. One of your guys, I'll say, like, I was there by the end of the process, but I don't think I ever got to the level that you were at with Anthony Richardson.
Mm-hmm.
And we have now reached a point in his career that is, it seems maybe like a fork in the road. And I don't know that it needed to be this way, but it is now. We've opened the can of worms. So what do you think about the situation?
Yeah, so Anthony Richardson was benched today. So the Colts can make a playoff run with Joe Flacco at the helm. Man, what do I think about it is a good question, because I feel like we've kind of lost the plot on developing quarterbacks. You draft this guy 4 overall after he plays a limited amount of football in college. We knew that. And we talked about that. You can go back and, run back the 23 takes where we're like, hey, he could do another year in college. It wouldn't hurt. He ends up coming out. And it's like, okay, the Colts also knew that. Like, there's no chance that we are watching the same thing they're watching. And they're like, oh, this guy's ready to go. They throw him out there. He ends up getting hurt. Okay. That sucks. He had some flashes his rookie year. Then he comes out, he looks markedly worse this year when it comes to accuracy. That being said, it's also like it didn't seem as bad as the box score looked. There's many drops on there. There's some near misses that like feel like they could be cleaned up. And then there's the question of like he subbed himself out because he was tired, and like quarterbacks don't do that. And that's fair. I think that that's 100% like you don't sub yourself out as a quarterback. Like everybody else is working harder than you physically on the field. Like Anthony Richardson, I guess, is a little bit of a different because he runs and there's a few run plays leading up to that, but we don't sub ourselves out of plays, especially on third down. Anyway, I don't think that's why they benched him. I think it's because he has like the lowest completion percentage in the league by far. I think it's because he's been playing poorly. I think it's because he can't hit short routes. I think it's because Joe Flacco gives them a better chance to win and they're in playoff position. All that being said, I don't know why you were indecisive about this player. Like either sit him or play him and let it ride because you knew it wasn't going to be pretty. You evaluated this player all off season. You knew he was coming back from a throwing shoulder injury. So I guess I don't fully understand the Colts' big picture plan here because I know it's not like Joe Flacco for the future. And I feel like you would rather Richardson get more live reps than like make a wild card and lose.
I mean, this is a really tough situation, I think, for the Colts to be in because like you're sitting at 4-4. You're second in the division. You're competing for a playoff spot. And you're not seeing what you need to see out of your quarterback. And it puts you in a tough spot because at the end of the day, you know, it's easy to say, yes, let's get Richardson reps. Let's see what we have here. It's not going to do any good sitting him. But at the same time, it's like when you've seen what Joe Flacco is doing for the offense in 2024 and we're competing and we all want to win, what do we do? Do we let the kid get the reps and hope that he gets better over the course of the season and continues to put us in a better chance to win? Or do we just say, right now, we got to pull the plug on this, give the keys to the vet, let him run the offense and see where we can go this year? And I think it's a really hard question because as easy as it is for us as fans to sit here and say, yeah, give your 4th overall pick the reps. He needs the reps. He's not going to get better if you put him on the bench. As easy as it is to say that, it's also incredibly difficult for an NFL team to potentially give up weeks of a competitive season to try to develop a quarterback on the fly. And so I get it from the Colts' perspective on why this happened. I don't know that I necessarily agree with it or like it, but it is a very tough spot for the team to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing is like Joe Flacco had the benefit of playing the Jags and the Titans and like looked competent against the Titans, looked good against the Jags. And like Richardson has played Green Bay, who has turned out to have a very good defense. Played Chicago, turned out to have a pretty good defense. Pittsburgh, he got hurt during that game. Miami, bad game by Anthony Richardson. And then Houston, who a ton of quarterbacks have struggled against. It's like, I don't know. I just feel like when you're talking about a fair shake and like what you're giving your quarterback and like Joe Flacco gives us a chance to win. What happens when Joe Flacco goes 0-3 in his next 3 games? And it's like, oh shit. Like now we also lost 3 games and our 4th overall pick is sitting on the bench, not getting these reps. And like now he also has the morale deflated because we benched him. It's like, I don't know. Like, obviously he's not playing well, but there should have been some level of expectation that it wasn't going to be all sunshine and rainbows for a little bit.
And talk about patience in Dynasty.
Yep.
How about patience in the league? That's a hard thing to come by. So
that's when jobs are on the line.
Yeah.
So and that's where it's like you get it. Like,
yep.
These guys, the GM, coaching staff are like, we need to win games or everybody's going to get impatient and we might get fired. And like, fair enough. But also, if Anthony Richardson hits, feels pretty good.
Which he still can.
That's what I'm saying.
As long as we're on the subject of 2023, I have to talk about everybody's favorite waiver wire ad of the week. My number 4 wide receiver in the 2023 NFL draft, Cedric Tillman, baby. When you stop believing, Deshaun Watson tears his Achilles, Amari Cooper gets traded, and Cedric Tillman becomes the Browns' number 1 wide receiver. I mean, it's awesome. It's awesome to see him doing this. And if you're one of the people playing Dynasty right now and you're trying to figure out who is this player, what is he long term, you're gonna hear me say, get him while you can.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have full faith in this player. And I think what we're seeing in the last 2 weeks is indicative of his talent. I think this was an incredibly talented wide receiver that had an injury-riddled senior season, fell in the draft, and then was stuck behind Amari Cooper on a terrible passing offense. And all of those things have been taken away, and you've seen what it's done for him. So that is my piece. Buy Cedric Tillman if you can.
I agree with you. I think like when we were going through his last season at Tennessee, we were like, this player's better than Jalen Hyatt. Like, we both agreed with that. And Jalen Hyatt ended up winning the Blitnikoff that year and ended up going, I think, 1 pick higher than him in the draft. I think that would, and it was like, okay, the NFL agrees that these players aren't that far off. And then he just like is buried. And there's a little bit of like, what's going on here? But like you said, this was literally one of the worst passing offenses maybe ever. Like, this passing offense was disgusting. And then they offload some guys and all of a sudden, Jameis Winston can throw for 300 plus yards and Cedric Tillman's getting meaningful snaps. It's like, hey, this guy looks really good. He's a reliable receiver that can also get downfield. Like, why not give him, 8 to 10 targets in a game? And so I think you're going to see a lot of these Browns receivers get kind of resurrected. We talk about up and down this roster, a bunch of weird players that kind of went to the Browns in like purgatory almost. Is like Jerry Jeudy underperforming on Denver, and then he ends up in Cleveland, and then Elijah Moore underperforming in New York, and then he ends up in Cleveland, and even Kadarius Toney's on this team, and Cedric Tillman now ends up becoming the X receiver on this team and ends up being the number 1 guy. So, I mean, all of these guys are probably worth looking into to see how much they cost from other guys in your leagues.
I do want to talk about 2024 guys because there's a couple of them that deserve a shout out this week.
Can I tell you my keep trade cut that came up when I pulled up the site?
Yes.
We got Curtis Samuel.
Okay.
De'Ami Brown. And a 2025 late 4th.
Give me the 4th, man.
Yeah, I'm keeping the 4th. I'm trading De'Ami. I'm sorry, Curtis.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but that's just over. Well, speaking of the Bills, wide receivers, Keon Coleman, baby. What I'm trying to do this year, last week was about patience with Odunze and some other guys, Trey Benson. Keon Coleman is a great little study for how powerful narrative can be. When you talk about a player that was typecast in a very certain way and compared to a player that had just busted in the draft in Quentin Johnston. And every week, man, we got to get it in. But everybody had their mind set on the fact that Keon Coleman is Quentin Johnston. Don't touch him with a 10-foot pole. And when you hear that so many times, like, it's hard to break free of it. It's hard to like separate yourself from this like group of the masses that are telling you this one thing, even when your mind and your eyes have seen another thing. And I think for us, we fought the fight with Keon Coleman for a long time. And then even at the draft, even when we did like final rankings last year, it was like we were still having these conversations about like, what is it going to look like in Buffalo? Are they going to stick him in the X wide receiver role? Is it going to work for him? And, you know, what is this thing going to look like? How high are we willing to take him? Can we stick our neck out for him at this point? And I think there's been two things that were simultaneously true here. The first is he shouldn't have been playing X wide receiver. I think he struggled in that role early in the season. And the second thing is, this is a talented football player. And with the second they bring in Amari Cooper, now suddenly you see Keon Coleman starting to come alive a little bit and having a little coming out party this week with a 70-yard game and the classic Keon Coleman touchdown, mossing the guy on the fade route. So I think it's this idea of role being so critical to NFL players, and when you're not in the correct role, it can be so harmful to you. But at the same time, Keon Coleman was never Quentin Johnston. This was never the same player. They might have had some like challenges or some weaknesses that aligned between their two games, but they were very different players with how they played at the college level. So this idea that, you know, oh, he is the bust of this class because he looks or he's kind of like this guy. It's all just narrative, and it caused a lot of people to give up on a player that had talent, and you're seeing it come out on the field now.
I missed his game against the Titans, and I watched the highlights later, and I like woke up the next day and I was like, did I dream that he had 125 yards? Like, is that a real thing that happened? And I was like, oh my God, he did. And it's pretty sweet because you can see that him and Josh Allen are starting to build a rapport. And like in that game against the Titans last week, they just had like one of those classic, I'm just going to throw you the ball and you do the rest. And it's kind of like the Rodgers Devontae thing where, you know, maybe this was a run play and you canned it to just be like a backside slant. And like, that's all it is. And there was on the touchdown, right before the touchdown, Josh Allen threw one up to him on a fade route on the opposite side, and it got broken up, and, you know, hit Tariq Woolen's jaw at him. Like, you know, come on, rookie. You think it's going to be that easy? And then he goes right back to him on the opposite side. Keon Coleman catches it and looks at him, and he's like, what's up? Come on. Like, so, I mean, it's the full Keon Coleman experience in this last game, though. You have some drops that are like, oh, man, like, I wish we came down with that. Like, this could have been another huge game where he had one where Josh Allen fit it in the hole between the safety and the corner, and, you know, he tracks it over his head, but it just skips off his hands. And it's like, you catch that, and now you have another 100-yard game and a touchdown. So, I feel like this is only going to get better as he develops as a player. I mean, we talked about him as a guy that needs a little bit of polish, that has a lot of raw athletic ability that can make jump ball catches, but struggles with some of the finer tune details. But it seems like starting to tune things up a little bit.
And one of the youngest wide receivers
Yeah.
from the class. And you're already seeing these sorts of flashes in this offense. So yeah, Keon Coleman. If you never gave up, if you held strong and you picked this player at the end of the first or top of the second, kudos.
So I want to talk about him on KTC right now.
Okay.
Because I don't understand a world where he's below Xavier Worthy.
I'm with you.
Okay. Because I'm
with
like
you.
I'm like, he just put together like back-to-back performances that are better than any game that Xavier Worthy has had. And it's like, I liked Keon more as a prospect. I understand that a lot of people had Xavier higher, and that was general consensus. But like, this is a guy that can legitimately be the number one target for Josh Allen. I don't think that like we're at a point where Xavier Worthy's going to be the number one guy for Mahomes. Like, they brought in DeAndre Hopkins when everybody else went down. And I guess you could say that about the Bills bringing in Amari Cooper too. But like, we're still seeing Keon be a guy that Josh is going to more often. So I don't know. I got a bone to pick with the community on that one. I don't know why we're not shooting them up a little higher. Where's the overreaction, KTC?
Yeah. See, that they don't do it though, because everybody hated Keon Coleman. That's right. The thing. These preconceptions still, even when in the face of production, you're still
like Jonathan Brooks is still like pretty high. Oh. I feel like when a guy's like out for 8 games, you're just like, oh, I don't really care about him anymore.
Where is Ladd McConkey these days on that list?
He is number 9 in non-superflex. So he's above both. It's like it goes Ladd, then Xavier, then Keon, then Bucky Irving.
I mean, what a week for Ladd. The coming out party this week. I mean, again, it's like these rookie receivers, they're all coming to they're all getting to this spot in their rookie year. Yeah, we're still waiting for a few of them, but most of these first round guys have had their moment this year. And Ladd's happens this week. And I mean, again, it's like on the opposite side of Keon Coleman with like, yeah, he needs refinement. This is going to be maybe a long-term deal. With Ladd, the appeal was he is almost like there already. He is the sort of player that can walk in on day one and contribute. And when he goes to the Chargers, you're like, oh my God, we're in business here. And like, it's, you know, he's a rookie. It's not going to happen from week 1, you know, every single week, but we have now gotten to this point. Week 8, he has this game. He shows all of these Ladd McConkey things with the yards after the catch and the route running. And, you know, it's another one of these guys, man, that it's like, this was such a fun class to watch, to scout, and to ultimately get to the point where you're drafting these players. And it's just awesome to see how many of them are showing up in their rookie years.
Yeah. Ricky Pearsall had his debut last week and had a, you know, solid game this week. Xavier Leggett has quietly had a few touchdowns this year on a terrible Panthers team. So all we're waiting for is Jalen Polk.
Don't forget Rome Odunze.
Yeah. Odunze, he had one nice game. Polk just gets blamed for all of the bad things that happened in New England.
You know, Cedric Tillman has given me hope with Jalen Polk that we can figure this out. But I do find it interesting that suddenly it's the hands that are the problem with Polk.
Yeah.
For his entire season last year at Washington and in camp and in the preseason, all these tough catches, that was like his brand. Like, he's not the best separator, but he's always going to come down with these balls. And now he can't catch, and the head coach is calling him out for it.
He had 8 drops in all of college. I'm like, what's going on?
I think when Mayo said there's something in his head, and he comes out and he's like, there's nothing in my head. Dude, There's something in your head. Like,
yeah.
go to the sports psychiatrist. You need help.
But on the other end of those throws, Drake May, he's looked pretty good. I mean, he got concussed this week, but last week and the week prior, he looked pretty crisp, and like he's making the throws that we expect him to make, and he's getting out of structure. The offense looks functional and watchable with Drake May at the helm, while it looks like complete disaster with Jacoby Brissett under center. So that was super encouraging, where it's like, hey, Drake May, this is a good player. And maybe it did help that he sat for a little while, but obviously it didn't protect him from getting injured.
Yeah, our convictions about May over Daniels maybe so far not looking great, but
That's good to me.
It doesn't matter, man. It doesn't matter because they're all good. They're all good. He's the guy. He always was, and I don't know why it took so long to get to this point, but you're already seeing it. Yeah, on a roster that is not built for this. Like this line, these weapons, like this is not built for a rookie quarterback to come in. It's like the CJ Stroud thing from last year, where it's like we're all panicked about what it's going to look like with this line and these receivers. And then it just so happens that it doesn't matter. And I think you're seeing a similar thing with May already, where he's elevating the team around him.
Yep, absolutely. I think that there's just like confidence that he brings to the offense. And I think that's part of going back to the Anthony Richardson conversation, maybe going full circle. That's part of what the Colts are doing. It's like the receivers are like, I just want the ball. You know, this guy is completing 40% of his passes. Michael Pittman's like, hey man, I like need my money, and in order to do that, I need to have 1,000 yards, and Richardson's not going to do that for me, and Joe Flacco can at least spread the rock. And I think that's kind of what's happening in New England, where it's like Kayshon Boutte is like, hey man, I'm actually a decent player, and nobody knew that because I've had fucking dog shit quarterbacks throwing me the rock. And now Drake May gets here and I have, 100 yards. It's like, oh, I didn't think you were even capable of that.
Talk about a fucking blast from the past,
yeah.
man.
I was like, who?
Oh man, you go back to episode 1.
Yeah.
Episode 1 of Camp Dynasty. You'll hear all about Kayshon Boutte.
Well, you hear about Kayshon Boutte in that
Boutte.
episode.
Yeah, that's right. Man, all right, that's fun. We're halfway through an NFL season, and it's just it never gets old, man. We spend all year watching these guys, and then it's like we're so quick to move on to the next year because you got to do it. But it's so fun to look back and just see where these guys have gone from all the the years since we've watched them in college, seeing what they're becoming. So fun stuff, man. I enjoyed this. This was nice.
Absolutely. What a good week of ball.
It was. And speaking of wide receivers, just to close things out, this thing that's happening, every single wide receiver like demands the ball now. Have you noticed this? Like
yeah.
Every single one of them is like, I need my targets right now.
Yeah.
It's like you're the wide receiver 2.
Yeah, right. Like sometimes you're going to get 4 targets in a game. I'm sorry. Like it happens.
Oh, never change, receivers. We love you.
Right.
All right. If you enjoyed this episode, breaking down week 9 of college football and chit-chatting about week 8 in the NFL, be sure to find us on Twitter at Camp_Dynasty and TikTok at Camp.Dynasty, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where video feeds of the pods do go up every week. And like, rate, review, subscribe, share, and follow the pod feed because we appreciate that as well.
Hey, go watch The Shining. Greatest horror movie ever made.
Whoa, hot take.
No, what? Is that a hot take?
Maybe it's
I feel like that's like a pretty normal take.
The greatest horror movie of all time.
Yeah.
I feel like
What?
taking my bias out of it, I feel like it's Halloween.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I disagree.
Let us know.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think. And thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty this week. And we'll see you next week.